timers are timing. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Gamification Revolution. I'm your host, Gabe Zickerman. It's so exciting to be with you today. It is a sunny day in San Francisco where I happen to be, and I'm joined by our lovely guest, Andrzej Marczewski, who many of you know from the UK. Hello, sir.
Hello.
And everybody's so excited to have you here. All of you who are regulars, it's nice to see you again. Michael, Dutch, Lori, David, Tiago. Oh my gosh, so many regulars. Welcome back. And for those of you who are new to the Gamification Revolution, welcome. If you're watching us live right now, log in with one of your social media contacts so you can ask us questions. And those questions are going to be answered by Andrzej and myself throughout the conversation today. If you're listening to us on the podcast, be sure to check in with us, usually Thursdays, but this week on a Tuesday around 1 o'clock Eastern, you can watch the live edition of the Gamification Revolution webinar on Spreecast and join us for our calls. And if you're not a subscriber to the podcast on iTunes, be sure to subscribe. You can get all of this exciting information about gamification and engagement delivered right to your device. Okay, so Andrzej, let's talk about your latest project, which is your book, Even Ninja Monkeys Like to Play.
Yes.
That came out recently, didn't it? Just like, what's it been, a few weeks? So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about...
A couple of days now.
Oh, really? Very exciting. So tell us about the book. And I know it's a labor of love. I know you've been working on it for a while. What's the book about?
Well, interestingly enough, it's about gamification. Yeah, you know.
Really? Don't say.
No, well, although funnily enough, my next project's a book of poetry, so you know.
Cambridge poetry, hopefully.
Yeah. Just stuff for my kids. But yeah, it's about gamification. It's about how I view gamification, how I've used it, how I talk about it, some of my theories, some of other people's theories, and all put together in something that resembles an easy guide to using it.
Okay. So lots of people have written books about gamification, right? I've written some, other people have written some. You've been an avid kind of consumer of it, practitioner of it for a number of years. What did you kind of think was missing? What's the piece that, like, you know, you're trying to address with this that you felt like, hey, hasn't been done, these people haven't actually gotten to yet?
It was a couple of things, really. I mean, the first thing was it was a project, as you said, it's a labour of love. It was just something I felt like doing, and I often have little side projects, and this one seemed like a fun one. What really kind of made it happen was that people have been doing research based on my user types, and one of the things that researchers and academics hate is citing websites. So a lot of my content obviously is on my blog, and they were getting told off in their PhDs for citing my blog. I couldn't write papers on it because it turns out if you're on a blog already, the paper doesn't work. And so I thought, well, let's put it on paper and get it printed and send it out there, you know, get it out in the world. So what the world was missing was me in print.
Yes, I agree. And perhaps in the nude as well. You never know. Maybe
you
a
have
future
to pay more for that.
Now, can we talk? Let's talk a little bit about your player types, and of course your blog, which is gamified.uk, right?
It is, yeah.
That everybody can check out. We'll put a link up to it afterwards, and there's a link up to your book right now on the Amazon store for folks who are interested in ordering it or ordering the digital or the print version. But so let's talk about those player types. What's been? Do you want to talk a little bit about that, because you've gotten a lot of a lot of attention for it.
It was one of these things. I'd been using Bartle's player types, as everyone does, and have been reading into what he did with it, and actually spoke to him about it, and realised that it didn't really fit gamification very well in certain aspects, especially in enterprise. Okay. And going up to somebody in enterprise and saying, well, you know, you could get these killer types, and it's hard enough talking about gamification. You start talking about killers as well, and we started having real sort of language barriers with them. And I've been really looking into the self-determination theory and Dan Pink's drive. I just thought there's something we can do here where you're working from a different angle rather than working from observation of players, actually working from what motivates them, and that's where it started.
Okay, so what's different about your vision of the player types from what people might be accustomed to. And player types a system for thinking about the motivation of people to play. What's different about your vision for that than what Bartle's player types were? And admittedly, Richard has said at G Summit and elsewhere, the player types were not intended to be this kind of structure for gamification. So what has it been for you?
The biggest difference. So the biggest difference, or the sort of what it means to me is. I designed them around observation of gamification after I'd done the sort of the motivation side of things. They were fine-tuned within gamification and not observing games at all, just looking at how people behaved in gamified systems that I was working with. So it's a tool made from the actual applications we would be using it for. And then I kind of explored the side of things where you're motivated intrinsically, and then I explored the ones who are more motivated by the extrinsic toys and the badges and stuff, and then started digging deeper into the more negative side of stuff, which I completely ignored initially. I was trying to be all very nice and everyone loves a good bit of gamification,
Right. And let's talk about the negative stuff for a second. What do you think? You mean in your kind of black hat, white hat model design? Is that what you're talking about?
Sort of, yeah. So I have the Disruptor Type, which has kind of a negative and a positive connotation. So obviously I'm of the age where disruption was a negative thing. You disrupted the rail services and things. So I started looking at people. It was mostly from practical experience. I found people in systems who just wanted to break the system for fun. And I hadn't really taken them into account because I was obviously looking at it from the point of view of people who were motivated to do what we were hoping they would do. So you find a lot of people who just want to break stuff, and you have to account for them. You can't ignore them entirely. So that was where I started looking.
Sometimes I think it's kind of interesting because I feel like I definitely broke a lot of stuff, growing up. And, my parents were always like, well, why can't you put it back together? Isn't like breaking things just a sort of natural part of the way that people learn, or does everybody not learn that way?
No, bro. I'm the same. I used to take apart my GI Joe figures and put them together with weird heads, and take apart clocks and try and figure out how they worked. And that's fine. And that's kind of from my types. That's the improver type. It's somebody who takes stuff apart, tries to rebuild it. But not everyone does that. You did that to learn. Some people just do it because they don't agree with it. And if you look at Bartle's types, you look at the killer and the griefer and that sort of thing, they just go around hurting people for fun. And you can't ignore that. They exist within every system.
So we already have we have some interesting questions that are already stacked up, and one of them from Bernardo Latafe, and thanks for this question, Bernardo, which is about developing a test to find the player types. And this is actually, he's got two questions. One is about the test, and then the other one is, I think, about merging all three of your player type graphs into one. And I put the URL up a couple minutes ago to the player types discussion up on your website, your main blog post. And I assume your book, Even Ninja Monkeys Like to Play, will include more detail about the player types so people can get that book. But so one of Bernardo's questions about the three being merged into one convenient graph. And the second one is about testing people for their player type. Can you say a little bit more about those two questions?
So the merging bit's interesting because if you look at the hexagon version, the hexad version of it, you can see that you've got the intrinsic types on there and then player and disruptor as like a grouping. It's really hard, and I've tried, and there's research, AIT, Austria Institute of Technology, are doing research around the user types at the moment, and they're having a similar problem. It's very hard to test for the disruptive nature of people and how disruptive they are. So, yeah,
why is
the testing.
Why is that especially difficult to test for?
Because if you say to somebody, "Do you like destroying things?" It depends how they kind of view the question. So when you're testing people, when you're doing the survey, the type you come out with at the end of the survey is the type you are when you're doing a survey, and that's completely different to when you're in a gamified system or playing a game or whatever. So it is extremely hard to test for it, and all you can do is try and get some kind of basic baseline for a type. Um, so some of the research that's happened in the past, in fact, in the last year, with a guy called Barry Herbert did a PhD on this. He was looking at how people went from extrinsically motivated types into the intrinsically motivated types. So if they went in as somebody who was a networker, so they were interested in connections, how they evolved in an educational system. But again, trying to map all three groups into one graph. If you can manage it, I'll be interested. I'll be honest, because they're all three completely different types of people.
It seems like it would need kind of a 3D graph. You know, one of the interesting things that made me think of is I worked Dopamine. My team worked on a project this year, doing a gamified survey for LAX, the Los Angeles airport, and actually maybe Mac will pull up a link to that so you guys can look at it because it I think informs this question. And part of the idea was to figure out what people really would do when it comes to public transit in the airport and parking in the airport because they always say one thing. They always say, of course, we'll take the train to the airport, but then in practice, they don't take it, right? Or they'll say, of
Yeah.
course, we'll go to the cell phone lot instead of driving around the terminal waiting to pick somebody up. But then, in practice, they don't. So one of the things that LAX wanted to figure out was what were the actual conditions under which people would make those different decisions based on time or pressure or whatever. And so we designed this really popular, got a bunch of attention, kind of gamified survey for them that was all about sensitivity testing in different real world scenarios. So brings me to my question: why don't we build a player type? Shouldn't we build a player type test or survey instrument that's actually gamified?
Absolutely, it should be done. And the research that's being done by these universities have people playing games to test what mechanics they liked and how they reacted to the mechanics, and then kind of work backwards from, well, these mechanics fit nicely with socializers, these fit nicely with disruptors or free spirits. So you could do it that way, and it would be a lot better. Time is an issue for me, why I haven't done it. Probably skill set's an issue, trying to actually develop that myself these days. But it'd be the better way of doing it. But actually, the interesting thing you said there is how people react differently within time as well, time and pressure changing how they react to things. And there's a wonderful thing called time construal theory, which you probably have seen, which says, as you get closer to an event happening, the way you think about it changes completely from when it's just a distant thing in the future. When it's I'll tidy my room tomorrow, that's fine. And when tomorrow comes, it's like, and it's suddenly a bit more of a concrete idea. So, but no, I think it would be very good to do that. Yes, make a gamified version.
I think we should work on it. I think it would be very interesting.
I'm always open to ideas.
Yes, amazing. So one of the kind of like more sort of fun questions about your book, and it's one that I honestly wanted to ask as well. So Dutch has beat me to the punch, which is what's the story behind the title of your book? Even ninja monkeys like to play.
Well, Dutch knows the story behind this actually because he helped me edit the book very, 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 very helpfully. Yes, and
thank you,
actually,
Dutch.
yes, thank you, Dutch. It came about from my youngest daughter. I've been trying to work out a title for it for a few weeks, and the Gamification Hub on Facebook have been helping me, and we've been going through lots of iterations. And I was having a conversation with my youngest, and I said to her, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And she sat there thinking about it, and she goes, "I either want to be a ninja, or I want to be a unicorn with wings." And this is a 4-year-old girl, and she's quite an interesting child. And I sat back and I thought, play. I love play, and her mind is so playful. And monkeys have always been a weird thing around me. I've always loved monkeys for some reason, and putting monkeys in names of things. And I just sat there and thought, it doesn't matter what it's called. It's about gamification. It'll have gamification in the subtitle. Think of the most daft name you can think of. And it just came, we should talk about ninjas and things. I thought, ninjas like to play. Ninja monkeys probably like to play. And that's it.
Sure.
Yeah, my daughter. Mostly. The crazy world that is a 4-year-old daughter's mind.
I think that actually sounds pretty fun. I was kind of hoping that the ninjas would kind of end up somehow, ninja monkeys would end up somehow in your kind of overarching theory, that maybe you could use them as a metaphor for describing the player types in the book and so on.
I had tried to do it with superheroes originally. Was how I had done the archetypes, and Marvel told me to
That's
stop.
interesting. Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah, I emailed them and said, I better just check to see if the superhero thing works out with Marvel. And I emailed them and they said, no, not a chance.
Yeah, I would just not ask them for permission. Personally,
Yeah,
you
that
know,
was the thing. Experience,
you
you
need to
see.
you need to get a little bit more American and just get a lawyer. Um,
Oh, yeah.
so a related, a kind of not related, unrelated question this time from Rock, who I guess is a first time viewer here on Gamification Revolution. Welcome, Rock, but maybe not. So Rock says that you and I, of course, I feel very honored to be included in this, have been very instrumental in helping him do or her do drive cost saving success at a Fortune 100. So the question is more about getting buy-in for enterprise gamification inside the corporate structure, and it's a frequent conversation. It's a frequent discussion that we have here. Every time I bring an enterprise person on, it's one of my first questions to them. How did you get your big, stodgy old company to agree to make gamification a thing? Do you want to talk about your personal journey a little bit? Because I've known you for a while and I know a little bit about it, but I think folks would be interested.
Yeah, it's a good one. It's a question I get asked all the time as well. How do you get people to actually take this on board as a good idea? And the first thing I used to do was not talk about gamification. We'd talk about behavioural change and influence and that sort of thing. And then as gamification became more of a recognised word, people actually started to talk to me about gamification rather than me having to introduce it into a conversation. But they'd always come at it from the wrong direction. They'd always say, well, we need a game. It's gamification, isn't it? Okay, so that you'll gently take them through the conversation about what it really is. Getting buy-in now is actually a lot easier because we have good case studies. The thing which, when you and I were talking years and years ago, when I was first looking at this, there weren't any good case studies. There's a lot of theory, a lot of people doing this stuff, and there was Gartner telling everyone it's all going to fail. And that was kind of all we had to work with.
Right.
But now you can. There are lots of good case studies. My favourite one to always do is to say, oh, well, HP did their Project Everest, and in 3 months they generated $1 billion. And as soon as you say that, they go, oh, okay, and that was gamification. Yeah, it was gamification. And that's how I break that barrier. Is I give them a really ridiculous case study, which we can say, well, here's the paperwork for it, and not have to do what we always were doing, which was, we had a 500% increase in engagement. Well, how many people did you have? 3. So for me, breaking that barrier is all about case studies now. It's about just giving them the facts, and if that's not enough for them, you ask them the question: do you want to improve? This will help. And leave it in that. Actually, just force them to answer that question themselves.
Do you feel like, and I think that's very interesting, right? Do you feel like and we're actually kind of, we're heading in this direction right now, in fact, because both you and I will be at the Gamification World Congress, which is coming up, in fact, just next week in Barcelona, for those of you who are conveniently located in Barcelona. We put up a code. You can use the code dopamine to get a discount on tickets for the event if you haven't already purchased your ticket. I will be there speaking for my first time. I know it's not your first time. You've been very involved in that event for a while. And I know it's exciting and very exciting for those of us who are, who are able to be in Europe, or those of you lucky enough to live in Europe and be close by. Can you give us a read on that enterprise kind of gamification? Where that's at in Europe right now. I know it's going to be talked about at GWC, but from your perspective, where are we at in Europe right now? There's been a lot of skepticism, I think, in Europe over the years. Are we getting past that, or people more open? What's going on?
Well, from my experience, I'm getting more and more questions about it on sort of week by week, month by month basis. So England was really slow, really slow to pick up on it. And someone said to me, well, why do you think England was so bad? And I have to think it's this attitude we have towards anything new. The British are really bad at taking on board new stuff. Spain has actually always been quite interested, and this is obviously with GWC. This is their 4th year now, and it's been getting bigger and bigger. You can almost sort of track how popular gamification is in Europe by how GWC has grown over the last couple of years. It's definitely, in the UK especially, it's definitely ramping up now. I said I'm getting a lot more stuff. France, they've had a few gamification HR summits in the last year or so. So it's definitely there. I think we're still quite far behind. And I think Europe tends to do this thing of we'll be far behind, then we'll jump ahead a bit, and then we'll kind of stutter, and then we'll fall into a nice plateau and a nice rhythm and probably be very good at it. But we never go in as quick as the Americans, or it's a bit slower on the uptake on new technologies.
Well, hasn't there also been kind of a concern on the European side about like privacy issues are more of a concern, and there are more rules governing kind of the workplace, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, if you you look at Mario Herger's work on all of this kind of stuff, and as you look around Europe, there are lots of different rules. I think it's not just that the rules are tougher. There's lots of different versions of the rules. So the UK has different rules to Germany, has different rules to France. And privacy and data protection is such a hot topic, especially as the EU's just overturned things like safe harbour. I've just said that safe harbour is no longer of any use. So one of the things we've had a lot of trouble with is being able to store data outside of Europe. It sounds like a simple thing, but it's a really complicated problem. And when you look at all of the platforms, they're all cloud platforms, but they're all working off US servers. So that causes problems, and people are sat there going, well, we don't like the data being there. In Germany, privacy is a huge, huge issue. You can't track anything that's identifiable to the person. So it makes gamification quite a complicated process, not being able to track somebody doing things. Right. So it could well be. It could be, as you said a minute ago, we don't all go out and get lawyers. We all ask permission before we do things.
Right. Which, is different. And again, probably even in gamification, right? Europe's not one market really. So even though we think of it monolithically, every one of these countries is different. Everyone has a different market opportunity. So it makes it more difficult, I guess, to bring big projects like gamification to market. Has anyone done a really good pan-European enterprise gamification project? Like, we've worked on some at Dopamine that have gone to multiple European countries in a rollout, but do you know of anyone who's done one that's really like, crossed multiple countries yet?
Nothing that comes to mind, no, actually. I have looked at it as well because obviously I work for Capgemini and we've got offices absolutely everywhere. And we've done internal things. We've done stuff across lots of territories, which has also brought its own interesting things. So across India, across the US, across Europe. And that brought up its own interesting sort of differences between how we all behave around it. But nothing springs to mind as just as a single, we're going to hit all of Europe with this project and see how it works. Right.
I think we need kind of like a big. Yeah. I as soon as we can share it, I would love to share so many of the things that we work on. I would love to share, but they're not always easy to share. So we had a question from Ivan a second ago, and thanks for that question, Ivan, which was about the free spirit type having 2 subtypes, and Ivan being confused about that and questioning how does that work. And so I put the green graph up on the screen so many people can now see this. And for those of you who can see it, you can actually move it if it's in the way. Can you just walk us through for 1 second the free spirit type and the subtypes and just explain how that works? I think it's an interesting, detailed question.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So the free spirit works around my concept of autonomy, which is slightly right, slightly wrong. But within the free spirit, you have the creative people and the explorers, which often get lumped into one group. But my experience is that you can get people who enjoy going off and doing things and looking at stuff. And you'll also get the ones who like going off and creating things and testing the boundaries of the system and what they can do with it. They're under one umbrella because they're all about testing a system. So they're all about seeing what the extremes are. And some are about finding the edges, some are about finding, what they can actually do within the system. But I think it's important to keep in mind that what works for one might not always work for the other. Not all explorers are creative. I love going off Grand Theft Auto. I never play the game. I just go and explore the edges of the screen and see at what point I drop off the end of the world. Minecraft, I'm useless at. I love to think I'm a free spirit. I love exploring. I love doing all of that. And then when it comes to building something, it's a tower, and it's one single type of block all the way to the sky, and then I jump off it. So, but it's all about freedom, and some people express freedom in different ways. Some are creative, some explore. Me naked dancing around with a ninja monkey, that would be fairly creative, I'd have thought.
Yes, I think somehow we've come back to nudity, and ninja monkeys as the recurring theme of this particular discussion. So hopefully,
there's a TV show in that.
I think so. Maybe a web show, maybe less television and more web, but I do think it's interesting. I think a lot of that, what's interesting to me, and I would love to understand a little bit more once we have, some more research about how some of your player types translate into the real world. I think the free spirit is another one of those types where I think, there's probably people say they're that more than they actually are that. Because the kind of empirical evidence tells you that most people are better at being creative and feeling happy in a system when there's some constraint. Is there something interesting about the true free spirits? How do we find those true free spirits, you think? And what, if we're designing a gamified system to try to, engage people, let's say in the workplace, what are some things that people can do with those free spirits to really get the most out of their energy?
I think, as you say, when you're making gamified systems, there are lots of constraints anyway. It's not the same as creating some big free world. One of the things which I found works is things like Easter eggs, just things people can go and find. I used to have on my website, if you dug into the source code, there was a password and a link to a website, and it took you to this place. You put the password in, and it gave you some extra points or something. Right. And I thought, no one will ever find it. And I found out 2 people had found it because they just decided to look at the source code and go into it. So you harness it by just hoping that it's there almost. When you look at gamification, we look at gamification of training, for instance. You have your corporate video. They take you through some stuff, and there's a couple of questions. And I would say within that video, have things that people might notice and quite like. And even if it's not something that people can go off and find, just being the ones who think, I saw that, and I'm the first person to see it, or that sort of thing helps, I think. The other part of the creativity is allowing people to join in with questions, for instance. One of the things I love is Quora, because people are really creative with how they ask their questions on Quora, and people come back with very creative answers to that. So it's just allowing a slightly more freedom, not just saying this is how you're going to do it, A, B, C. Let people go A, C, B, A, D, B, and eventually let someone create Z if they want to. Sorry, Z if they want to.
Yes, exactly. No, it's okay. We understand Z. I'm Canadian. Don't forget.
Canadian, of course, yeah.
And if you want to talk about Celsius, I can talk about Celsius. So a couple of remaining questions while the time goes so quickly in this. So David Chandros, thanks for the question. David asks, obviously your player types are different from Bartles. Bartles were for MMOGs, really came out of early MMOGs and MUD players, right? Yours are really focused on gamification specifically. Is your vision, the application of your player types is really specifically for gamification?
It was. And especially because I started with just the 4 types, just the intrinsic types. But I've had games designers tell me they've used it, and especially the 6 types, because obviously with Bartles types, you started with 4, he expanded it to 8 to cover certain things that weren't there, and other people have worked on it. So my vision for them is that people just find them useful. I actually don't care how they use them. What I love to see is how people have done it and the feedback I've got from it. And something that Bartle does is he has to stand his ground on things and say, no, this is what it does, this is why it does it. With me, if someone challenges me and I think, it's pretty good, a new type gets created. You know,
Right.
I'm fairly.
Right.
I think we've got 6 basic ones, and we're up to about 13 detailed ones. I might stop there to make it usable still, but no, the vision is just that it's useful to people, and the real key of it is it just makes people remember that there's not one type of person. Just because I like
You know,
something doesn't mean you're going to like it.
yeah, yeah. And like I think the types are actually really useful when we're doing like conceptual design, right?
Mm.
Ultimately, I think what everybody wants, I think what the hunger is really for is, I think is the hunger is really for some way of like identifying the player early, right? So that the system can target them more specifically. I mean, I think ultimately most of the
Yeah.
designers are kind of after something like that. And so, so maybe after it gets through this phase, it's really got to be, we just have to have a good instrument, for figuring that out for people. I think that's something that people really want. And you definitely got some applause in chat, by the way, for being open to changing the typologies anytime you want. Okay, we got one last question, and this is from Ree. Ree, thanks so much. I think it's your first time here. So nice to have you here, Ree Zoldak. So the question is, and I think it's a great question for us to kind of end on today, which is, what do you do when the company says they want gamification, but what they really want is a game? And I'll tell you from my personal experience, this is basically like the recurring nightmare slash regular everyday story of my life,
Yeah.
in working with clients. I'm curious to hear what your ideas are, how you deal with that in your organization when you talk to people.
Well, yeah, as we said earlier, it's often what they think they're asking for as well. When they say we want gamification, as you say, they wanted a game. There are 2 ways I've handled this in the past. The first way was to give them a game. I've found them a games design company, and we built a game, and they were happy with that. The second one is to really dig into what they're trying to do, because often you'll get this question, and you see it all the time. I'm trying to think who did it recently. Harrods, possibly. Yeah, they created this version of Candy Crush to advertise high heels, and it was
Yep.
shoes, and you had to match shoes. And I can imagine the conversation went, "We want a game," and some poor bloke in the background's going, "Oh, really? That's quite hard to do," And they got given the money, the budget, and they said, "Well, we can do this." Often one of the things I do is say to them, "How much money have you got?"
Right.
Because making a good game is really expensive. Normally, some very, very good developers and very good games designers can do very simple looking games that are brilliant. But really, to make what most people have in their minds, they're thinking of Call of Duty for Excel.
Right.
So it's getting that out. It's how much, as Michael Finney's just said, how much time do you have? It's
Right.
usually when someone in the enterprise says, "I want a game," they want it tomorrow. So it's very much, really, what do you want? What are you trying to do? These are examples of how it can be done without a game. Here is a way we can do it with just 15 people for a shoestring budget. Let's work from there. So it's really taking them back to the core of the problem.
Right. And I will say, I think that's actually really, really stellar insight. Though I don't know, like Call of Duty for Excel actually sounds kind of fun, and I might play it because I actually kind of love Excel. So that's like a separate conversation
Mm.
we could have another day. So the other thing that I would add to that I usually do is, what I do is put a pin in their like game design idea and say, okay, great. So the game design, that's really cool. So here's what that would look like if we did that. Now, let's take a step back, right? Let's go through the process of figuring out what it is that you actually want. Now, let me show you some other actual ideas. And so one of the things that's costly about doing the way that I do it is, obviously you've got to invest a lot of upfront resources in coming up with some ideas and some design concepts that, to kind of to show alternative ways of accomplishing the goal. But once somebody's like really locked in on a particular game design idea or concept for how they want to execute their program, it can be difficult to move them off of that.
Yeah.
I think move them off of that soapbox without something tangible to show them and say, "Hey, I know that you think you want this SimCity clone, but let me show you this other thing over here that actually will be really cool and like, kind of get you where you want to go." And I'm the whatever $6 billion sale of Candy Crush is not going to make it easier for us to move people off of games in any way, let's say. But I am so very happy that you were able to join us today. Your new book, Even ninja monkeys love to play. Like to play, in this case. Not love, because you're not American, you're British. Wait, show the book again so everybody can see it one more time. Even ninja monkeys like to play. It's available on Amazon, and you can go to the website at gamified.uk to find out more. Look at the player types, order a copy of the book from there. I'm sure it's even better. You can follow us both on Twitter at @daverage and at Jesus Firm, if you know. Does it sound funny when I say it out loud?
It's Dave Rage.
I get it, but it looks like the
But it is
average
the
to
average, I
me.
know, which I didn't know at the time was an Excel function.
Yep, yep. At the average. And you are definitely not average. Sir, thank you so much for being with us. And thanks all of
Thank
you
you.
for joining us here on the Gamification Revolution. If you're coming to Gamification World Congress, we'll see you next week in Barcelona. And
Yes.
otherwise, we'll see you in about 2 weeks right here with our next guest. In the meantime, everyone, keep making the world more fun. See you soon.